Hello guys, this is your friend. We are back with a new fanfic. Which is What If Naruto x Harem x Samui x Yugito x Fu, Part 1 Naruto x Harem. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start a new fanfic. Sunlight poured into the hospital. It was a cool, fresh light, fitting for beginnings. Inside the hospital room, the light fell across Minato's face and touched an opening there, tugging on his lips and making the smile more radiant. The light flowed across the room, scattered 1,000 tiny rainbow beginnings on the shiny medicine bottle. So, Minato, have you decided on a name for the boy yet? Asked a curious Jiraiya, breaking the comfortable silence. Why yes, indeed we have. I think you'll like it, Jiraiya-sensei. Minato replied. Well then, out with it, brat. What did you decide to name him? Naruto, Minato said simply, allowing his smile to grow wider. It was the name of the protagonist of his teacher's first novel. Jiraiya was taken aback by the name but smiled nonetheless. He couldn't wait to play the role of the cool uncle. The night of the attack. An involuntary chill ran down Minato's back as he turned around to see who was behind him. No one. His eyes instantly narrowed, all semblance of emotion gone from his face, now displaying a cold ruthlessness, the face of a cage. Reveal yourself. Who are you? As soon as the words flew out of his clenched teeth, someone materialized right in front of him. He took in the man's appearance. He was wearing a long black coat, a white mask with ripples in the design, and a hole for one eye. God, was that a Sharingan? Me. I'm Toby. Nice to meet you, Hokage-san. I know as well as you that the name you just gave me is fake. Who are you really? What do you want? Oh, I thought the Yondaime Hokage of Konoha was supposed to be a genius at deduction. Surely you can tell my identity with a look. Do that trick of yours now. Deduce who I am. Toba's voice seemed falsely cheerful. Minato sighed. He really didn't have the time for this. At first glance, I'd say that you're an Uchiha. But you're not. If you were, you'd be a missing nin, except that there has been no Uchiha missing nin in the last 7 years, the masked man twitched. Therefore, you're not an Uchiha. And you look young. I'd say you are about 17, 18. That leaves us with only one alternative. Seeing as you have chosen to reveal only one Sharingan eye and the fact that you wear a mask to cover your face, I'd say you found an Uchiha in battle, killed him, and took his eye for yourself. Toby took a step closer to Minato. The look in the masked man's eye told him he was wrong. Was the man angry? I see that I was wrong about that. Ah well. But, you seem to know me. I can see the recognition in your eyes. The masked man twitched again. You're angry. I could go on, but I don't really have the time to squabble with a kid right now. I suggest you go back to wherever you came from before you get hurt. The masked man started laughing. It was a burst of maniacal, insane laughter, the laugh of someone who has lost everything. Very well done, Hokage-san. You're still the same as ever. I am the tiniest bit disappointed, however. I thought, of all people, you would recognize me. I guess I've changed a lot more than I thought I had, said Toby, sighing. Minato, however, was even faster than Toby. The technique Toby was using was definitely a space-time jutsu. He knew it would be hard to fight against this strange jutsu, but he'd observed that Toby needed about 2 seconds before he performed the technique again. And that opening was all he needed. The two shinobi clashed, and this time Minato managed to use the opening. The tri-pronged kunai made its way into his hands as quick as a bolt of lightning as he slashed Toba's arm in the 2-second window before he could use the technique again. When they separated, Toby was bleeding. For a moment, the fight stopped as Toby inspected the nick on his arm. It seems that I underestimated you, Hokage-san. You've only grown better with the passing of years. Minato's lips turned upwards as he began running. Again the two clashed, and again and again. It wasn't until 10 minutes had passed. Lasting 10 minutes against the fastest ninja in the world was a feat in and of itself that Minato was able to find an opening to use again. He threw the kunai, both of them close, and his Rasengan passed through his shoulder. I won. Suddenly Minato disappeared, grabbing the kunai in midair before he slammed his Rasengan on his back, causing an enormous crater. Minato looked around to see Toby clenching his right arm before it started falling off, and instead of blood, a white substance came out of it. The masked man was about to run away when Minato teleported in front of him and slammed his hand on his chest. Contract seal. Back on the battlefield, Kurama was finishing his tailed beast bomb when the Sharingan in his eyes slowly disappeared. Before he could launch the bomb, a giant toad appeared on top of him. His aim was changed at the last second, launching the bomb in the air. After a few seconds, the bomb exploded, causing a bright light that illuminated the entire arena around the Hidden Leaf Village and beyond. Suddenly, a massive wind wave came through the village so strong that some small trees were ripped apart. Several windows were shattered, and many unlucky civilians who hadn't reached the shelter yet were yeeted in the air before falling roughly back down to their deaths. The third Hokage opened his eyes, expecting to see Minato and the Kyuubi in front of him. Kyuubi wasn't there anymore. Even the entirety of the Nara clan that were holding the Kyuubi in place looked confused. The only thing left was an enormous crater where Kyuubi had stood a moment ago. Minato. Outside Konoha, the loud cries of a baby could be heard in the darkness of the night, his blonde hair, blue eyes, and 3 whisker marks on each cheek. Naruto. A voice suddenly said, looking down at his son. How it had gone so wrong, he didn't know. The masked man had attacked them out of nowhere. The man looking down at the baby had long blonde hair that reached his shoulders. His wife, Kushina Uzumaki, was close to him. Minato took Kushina, Naruto, and Kurama away from the village to seal the Kyuubi inside Naruto. Kushina didn't have that long. Despite being an Uzumaki, she knew her time was coming. Her breathing was getting slower as her vision got dizzier by the second. Mina-kun, you sure about this? We both know how Jinchurikis are treated, Kushina begged, afraid that Naruto wouldn't have a happy childhood. He would already have a hard life because he wouldn't have his parents to raise him, advise him, and see him have his first steps, his first word, and tell tales when he's scared. But worst of all, people's grief for their lost ones would probably blind them and be harsher to their baby boy. Naruto was only a few minutes old, and his cries continued. Minato looked at her with sadness. He was thinking the same thing, but he had no choice. I can't tell someone else to sacrifice their children, and who better than the Hokage of the village to seal Kyuubi? He glanced down at Naruto, who was letting out tired cries. I trust Hiruzen. He will take care of him, and the same for Jiraiya sensei, he answered with certainty. His sensei was like a second father to him. He had no doubts that even if everyone turned their back on Naruto, Jiraiya would never do that. He turned to Kyuubi, whose gaze was on Naruto, and his eyes showed shock before they narrowed. His face showed both shock and a hint of sadness. The fourth Hokage didn't know why the big fox looked at Naruto with a shocked face but didn't have time to ask. Kushina could barely hold him any longer with her chakra chains. Minato took a deep breath as if it would be the last. Doing the hand signs, the god of death made his appearance. The Shinigami has a translucent, gaunt specter with a demonic visage. It is much larger than an average human, possessing long, shaggy, white hair, from which 2 red horns protrude, as well as purple-colored skin. It is draped in a large white kimono and carries a set of prayer beads with a tanto in its mouth. What do you want, mortal? The Reaper demanded, his tongue licking his big knife. The moment his appearance was in the mortal world, everyone around the area felt a shiver of cold. The fourth felt his body shaking. He wasn't sure if it was because of fear or cold. Even the large Kyuubi felt a shiver in his body, his mind warning him to run away. Taking a deep breath to calm himself, he turned to look at him with no fear in his eyes. I want you to seal Kyuubi inside Naruto, Minato demanded with cold, piercing eyes, showing no fear to the Shinigami. The Shinigami narrowed his eyes before nodding. His arms moved towards Kyuubi. Minato turned to look at his son, knowing he had a few moments before the Shinigami took his soul. Kushina kept looking at Naruto. She didn't want to believe that their time was limited. How much she wished that she and Mina-kun could stay like this forever. Kushi-chan, we need to say goodbye, she suddenly heard Minato's voice. Reluctantly nodding her head, she looked down at Naruto again. His eyes slowly opened to reveal ocean blue eyes like Minato. She smiled at her treasure, and Naruto smiled a little. He recognizes us, Kushina thought. Minato smiled at Naruto, the brightest smile he could muster right now. Naruto, I want you to become what you want, do something that brings you happiness. Kakashi will be there for you as well, I know it. Please, if you become a shinobi, be strong and take care of your loved ones, and eventually, naturally, you will start liking girls. Whatever you do, choose one that loves and can take care of you, just as you take care of her. Minato felt everything slowly darkening. The last thing he saw was his son crying in Kushi's arms before everything went dark, and his head fell to the cold ground. Slowly the entire Kyuubi shrank inside Naruto, who was still quietly sleeping. In his stomach formed a seal that looked like the Uzumaki symbol, a spiral. Seeing Minato fall broke her heart into pieces. With all the strength she had, she looked at her child. Naruto, my baby boy, I know you will have a hard time without us, but you should know Mina-kun, and I love you more than life itself. You will soon meet Jiraiya. Don't become like him, but he's still a good man who will take care of you. I love you. My Sochi, Kushina spoke, tears streaming down her cheek. Kushina's chest was barely rising. She could hear Naruto crying in her arms, but her whole body started feeling numb, her legs first, and now her arms didn't feel anything anymore. Suddenly she felt and saw 5 unknown shinobi land near her. Her heart started beating faster in fear when her eyes recognized one of them. San. She managed to speak, her voice barely a whisper. It was a miracle that the son of the Raikage even heard her, his eyes landing on her in shock. Kushina-san. Shouted in shock. To see the woman who beat his brother into a pulp in this condition was not something he expected. His eyes briefly flickered at the body of Minato, his heart skipped a beat to see his rival dead. Kneeling before her, he cursed his luck for not having a medical ninja with him. Stay awake, Kushina, I'm sure you will be alright, said, but from her pale face, her breathing almost non-existent, he knew he was speaking nonsense. He briefly noticed the child in her arms. He was about to take her inside Konoha. Perhaps they could help when her eyes widened in horror. He's see coming. Please take Naruto away. Please protect him. Please. Not knowing where she got the strength, she lifted Naruto close to A's big arms. Didn't know what to think, but hearing her words, he decided to believe her, grabbing the newborn baby into his arms. He abruptly turned to his team. We are leaving, he ordered. Within seconds, they disappeared from the place in a burst of lightning. A few seconds later, a figure with a mask appeared, his breathing rapid, no one could see his face, but he was wincing and was almost out of chakra, but he had enough to get the brat. When his eyes landed on the corpses of Kushina and Minato, he clenched his teeth, his hands turned fists, his nails digging into his palms. Where is he? He shouted, looking around but couldn't see the brat. I don't know, but we need to leave, the Hokage is getting closer. Zetsu spoke blankly, his plant-like body coming out from the ground like a tree. Hokage. If he didn't take the Jinchuriki, then who did? He demanded. From Zetsu's words, it seemed the Hokage had yet to arrive, but if he wasn't the one who took the brat, who did? He knew he would have no problem killing the old man Hokage in any other situation, but he was tired, and fighting Minato took quite a lot from him. I don't know, but we must leave now, Zetsu said, but more like ordering him. The masked man glared at him before disappearing, along with Zetsu, who sank into the ground. 2 minutes later, the third Hokage arrived with his men, finding only the bodies of Kushina Uzumaki and Minato Namikaze. Hiruzen could do nothing but stare hopelessly. The son of his successor wasn't here. Where are you, Naruto? Hiruzen thought out loud with a bit of panic, sweat rolling down his cheeks. He needed to send a message to Jiraiya as soon as possible. He prayed on his way back to Konoha that Jiraiya would find Naruto and bring him home. He didn't know how long he and his team had been running, but the sun peeking on the horizon was a sign that it had been quite a few hours. What started off as a simple mission of killing a dangerous missing nin that required A's assistance turned into a rescue mission. After killing the fool, A and his team decided to return back. On the way back, their sensor detected massive bursts of chakra coming from Konoha, and according to him, it was Biju chakra. Despite his mind telling him to mind his own business, A had decided to check. What was the worst that could happen? Now, A was dreading the moment his father finds out who was in his arms. He's coming. Her words rang in his ears like bells since he ran away from Kushina, his heart telling him that he was a cruel man for leaving someone like her behind, dying and alone, but the other part telling him that he had done the right thing. A didn't know which side was right, but he had made the decision, and he wouldn't back down now, like a coward. He's coming. A closed his eyes tightly to see a woman who could stare at a fully turned B with a smile and no fear in her eyes to someone who was filled with fear. A wondered who this person was, and perhaps it was better that he didn't stand around and find out. Soon they found a clearing in the forest, stopping there to catch their breaths. Several of his team fell on their knees, tired. A chose this moment to stare down at the baby. He remembered his name was Naruto, quite unique, A thought, knowing his father had simply named him, A. How could someone be so lazy he didn't know? His father could fight 10,000 shinobi on his own and not bat an eye, yet he was lazy at naming his own child. Do you feel anyone? I asked the censor. The man closed his eyes for a moment before shaking his head. No, A-sama, there's no chakra around us, the man said with a bow of his head. A simply nodded, turning his attention back to the baby, his eyes blue like Minato's. His face had a few things from Kushina, but mostly from his father. A briefly wondered if Naruto would be able to use Kushina's chakra chain and her unique Uzumaki sword. Naruto raised his little hand, grabbing his thumb. A found himself smiling at the baby. It seemed the little Naruto was trying to steal his heart with his cuteness and was working. Damn it, A cursed under his breath. Naruto left out a soft giggle. What should we do with the baby? The voice of his subordinates made him escape his thoughts. Gaining back his composure, he straightened up, turning fully to face his men and releasing a bit of killing intent to get his point across. We are taking him to Kumo. No words to anyone about what you saw in Konoha or what we did unless as the rakeage. A slip of your mouth and I will have your heads, A ordered, his eyes paying close attention to each of them in case they showed even the slightest sign of treasonous thoughts. Seeing nothing, he turned his attention back to Naruto, who was trying to his thumb. He's hungry, I reckoned. They needed to hurry. Kumo. They arrived back at the village just as people had woken up, shops opening, and the sun rising, showing the beginning of a new day. Usually, after every mission, A and every shinobi would report back to the rakeage, but A first needed to put Naruto in a hospital, asking if someone could feed Naruto. After making sure that he was well fed, which took much longer than he had intentionally thought. He even earned a glare from the nurse when he asked why is taking so long. The little angel needs his milk to grow his bones and body. You will sit there and wait. I won't have any hungry child around here under my watch, the nurse told him strictly, with a tone as if she was talking with a child instead of a fully grown man. A grumbled under his breath but decided to wait. After all, Naruto needed to be fed and grow strong. After 30 minutes, only then Naruto stopped drinking milk, with a little smile on his little face. The nurse who fed him kissed his forehead before telling him to have sweet dreams. Bringing him to his office, A briefly wondered if all children ate that much. Once he knocked on the door, he dismissed the thought. Hearing his father's command for him to walk inside, A opened the door. Behind the desk stood his father with a grim look on his face, almost trying to scare him away. Despite knowing him his whole life, A still wasn't sure if that was his default face or if he was just extra angry today, which was a tough thing to achieve, considering his age. His father was a very tall, dark-skinned man with a largely muscular and well-defined build. He has a full head of white hair, which flowed into his back, along with a long beard. He has unusual eyes, which had green irides, dark sclerae, and no pupils. His face has pronounced cheekbones and tear troughs under his eyes and a prominent crease across his forehead with a mole above his right eyebrow. His top lip also had a darker pigmentation than the bottom one. His canine teeth were also slightly elongated. He has the kanji for lightning tattooed on his right shoulder, with a lightning bolt-shaped scar that runs across the right side of his chest. His typical attire consisted of Kumogakure's distinctive, single-strap flak jacket with no other clothing underneath, a black forehead protector that he wore like a bandana, and a thick rope tied around his waist. With this, he also wore dark blue sweatpants. It was also shown that at some point in the past, he wore bandages on his forearms. Hey, why are you so late? My informer told me you arrived 40 minutes ago. Might I know what took you so long? Or did you stop somewhere to shit? I demanded, his voice sharp and stoic, sizing his son up as if he were going to punch him in the face. A gulped, he had fought and won countless fights, but his father could always make him shake, making him feel like a child all over again, remembering when his father had once thrown him from the highest mountain of Kumo to make him a man, according to him. Because of him, A said quickly, pointing at the sleeping bundle in his arms. A slid down the piece of clothing covering Naruto to show his face to his father. Seeing the child, I walked around the desk, now standing just 2 feet away from his son, leaning close. With one look, he could tell this child wasn't his grandson. His eyes narrowed dangerously at his son, the presence of the unknown baby the only thing keeping him from releasing his ki. Who is this child, boy? I demanded with a low, calm tone that made him sound even more terrifying. Not my son, father. I found him in Konoha, A quickly explained, lifting Naruto slightly higher as if using him as a shield. Konoha, what possessed you to do that? Whose child is he? I demanded right away, stepping forward. The only thing keeping him from screaming at him was the baby. He's Minato's son with Kushina Uzumaki, A explained. Eyes widened, almost falling off his eye sockets, his heart beating on his throat like a sledgehammer. Not even facing the 8 tails had made this heart beat so fast. He briefly remembered the 3 times he had met Kushina and Minato. He hadn't outright fought them, but he knew both were extremely dangerous, especially Minato. His speed was unlike anything he had ever seen, and he could have sworn that his blue eyes turned icy whenever he was furious. As for Kushina, she was the girl he had tried to kidnap and bring to Kumo, something he had come to regret when he had been heavily injured because a group of elite shinobi from an unknown place had tried to kidnap him for whatever reason. That day had shown what he had tried to do to someone else. And to hear that his idiotic son had kidnapped the son of Minato and Kushina. You better give me an amazing reason not to punch you in the face and send you flying to the other side of the world. I spoke with a much lower tone, sending shivers down A's body. I knew when he was in danger. He quickly recapped what had happened after he completed the mission. Hearing that Minato and Kushina were dead made I release a heavy sigh, but he also felt insecure and a little anxious. Kushina was a monster by herself, and to think she was afraid of whoever was coming was a red flag. He pondered on what to do next. He could send Naruto back to his home village and explain everything to the third Hokage, but that brought up the danger of hatred against Jinchuriki. I knew that it had taken many years for B to be somehow accepted by the village, and even to this day, there were still many who still glared and spoke insults when they thought that B couldn't hear them. From his words, I knew many people must have died in Konoha, and the identity of the Jinchuriki would be hard to keep secret, not counting that Naruto wouldn't have a family of his own. What do you think we should do, father? I asked, making I escape his thoughts. Looking up, he could see Naruto playing with one of A's fingers, and from the way A was smiling. You want to adopt him, don't you? I asked with a heavy sigh. He could read his son as easily as reading a book. He wasn't angry but more amused and interested. Yes, and Kushina told me to protect him. That's what I will do, A answered right away, looking directly at his father, whose lips twitched slightly, but he didn't allow himself to smile. He was happy that his son wanted to adopt Naruto. After what happened to Ymir, he doubted his son would ever love any other woman. But there was still one more thing to ask. And if he one day finds out the truth and wants to leave, what will you do? I asked carefully one of the most important questions. A opened and closed his mouth several times, looking down at Naruto. He was trying to grab one of his little fingers. Perhaps to him, it was an interesting new toy to play with. I will never force him into anything if he wants to return. A stopped mid-sentence, looking up at his father. Once he turns 12 years old, I will tell him everything, and if he wants to return to Konoha, I will allow him. Finished with sincerity. Naruto finally grabbed his little finger, letting out a cute chuckle as he did. I smiled before nodding his head in approval. Very well, from now on, he's your son. Naruto Yatsuki. When he had decided that Naruto would be his son, he hadn't expected this. I knew from everyone that babies, in general, were troublesome creatures that enjoyed annoying people for some reason. But I felt that went double for a kid like Naruto once he ended his conversation with his father. I had been quick to find his brother, who was doing some annoying poses that no one would understand or find funny, yet, his brother kept saying that his rap was simply misunderstood and that people were too idiots to understand. Misunderstood I had thought back then, once they arrived at their home, which was more like a mansion, I had wasted no time introducing B to Naruto. His brother had smiled brightly at the sight of the young boy, but he immediately asked something that put him in a bit of high alert. He's not your son, isn't he? B questioned, currently looking at the laughing Naruto, who was playing with his big fingers. I grumbled slightly. His brother had seen right through him, and he really didn't like that it was way too obvious. He's not. I found him in Konoha. I went and explained everything that happened on his mission, arriving and finding a dying Kushina who told him to protect her son. After hearing the whole story, B stood silent for an entire minute. The only sound in the room was Naruto, but even he was extra quiet as if he could somehow read the gloomy mood. After 1 minute, B released a deep breath from his throat. Kushina-san is dead. B spoke with a tone as if he couldn't believe his brother. Looking down at a suddenly sleeping Naruto, he could see the signs. They were as clear as day. He had taken a lot after his father. B had known Kushina. They fought 7 times, and in all of them, she won despite him using full Biju mode against her. After the fight ended, they would act like good friends, despite being at her mercy 7 times. Not once Kushina tried to kill him for what Kumo tried to do to her. My village valued family, honor, and duty above everything. To me, Minato is that family. To you is A. I don't forget what your village tried to do, but I won't make my own life less enjoyable because I want to seek vengeance. Kushina had once told him from that day, B had gained a huge amount of respect for the woman. Her abilities with her Uzumaki sword were a sight to see. Does anyone else knows that he has Kyuubi? B questioned. He didn't need his brother telling him that the moment they got close to the mansion, Yuki had been quick to warn him that he could feel Kyuubi nearby. No, besides father and the team that was accompanying me, A answered quickly, understanding why his brother was concerned about that. Good. This should be kept secret. Besides our family, Naruto and Yugito, no one else should know. If I see people glaring at Naruto, I will rip out their eyes, B warned seriously. He knew the blonde girl was lonely, and she needed friends in the future. Naruto could be that friend. A was taken aback by his words but relieved at the same time, fearing that his brother would perhaps not welcome Naruto into their family. I already thought about it, but what about telling Naruto about Kyuubi? A question. His brother would know about this kind of business better than anyone else. B looked deep in thought before answering. At 7 years, that's the perfect age. We can start doing light training at 5, B explained before rubbing his hands together, a grin that appeared formed on B's face. I can't wait to teach my nephew my amazing sing aahhhh, his words interrupted when A slammed a fist on top of his head. You will do no such thing. You won't infect Naruto with your craziness, A said, glaring down at B, who was wiping away fake tears and murmuring that the world wasn't fair. Now, back to the present, it had been 4 years since Naruto joined their family. His father had quickly gotten used to the role of the angry grandfather who never smiles, but it was sure he would often smile in front of Naruto when he thought no one would notice it. But having a baby in their family had proven challenging in so many ways he hadn't seen coming, one of them being his food. Naruto drank milk like he was starving every time. Once he grew old enough for other types of food, he ate almost as much as B, and second, he was way too energetic for his age. The moment he started crawling, he went on and explored every corner of the house, soon trying to sneak outside with the help of B, who would happily help his nephew to sneak outside, with the excuse that it was good for everyone to go outside and let the sun hit their skin. That said, A was now searching for Naruto. He quickly noticed he wasn't home. A grumble escaped his throat. Walking outside, he checked every place he knew. B and Naruto frequently spent time together. Checking every place, he felt dread settling in. He was half convinced to go to his father when he noticed a huge crowd of people around the ramen restaurant of Kumo. A quirked an eyebrow. The restaurant often had many consumers, but not a sea of people in front of it. Suddenly, he heard the voice of someone he knew way too well. Come on, nephew, don't slack off, face your opponents with no mercy. B said while rapping. A let out a loud grumble. It seemed he found his son, walking through the crowd of people. Many stepped away the moment they recognized him. After walking through what seemed like 100 people, he reached the front of the restaurant. He saw his brother still encouraging Naruto to keep going and not give up while Naruto was busy eating a bowl full of ramen, but A's eyes widened like plates when he noticed what looked like a mountain of empty bowls in the bar near Naruto. A's jaw almost hit the floor. It had taken everything for him not to gasp when Naruto emptied his bowl. One more, he requested the chef, who quickly brought him another one with a broad smile. Here you have him. Ladies and gentlemen, is the 100th bowl. Will my brother break the record, or will he shame our family? B suddenly announced for everyone to hear as if this was some kind of show, and it got even worse when the crowd let out a loud, yay, for Naruto, who was taking several deep breaths, preparing to eat the last one. A noticed that B hadn't seen him yet. He knew he should perhaps stop this nonsense, but his curiosity got the better of him. Again. Taking a deep breath, Naruto shoved the bowl in his face, eating like a maniac. Silence fell over the crowd of now 1,000 people, all of them holding their breaths as Naruto was slowly eating the last one. Even B was quiet, which was a tricky thing to achieve. A simply stared blankly at his son. 1 minute later, he slammed the empty bowl into the bar, which was soon followed by the whole crowd cheering. Congratulations, Naruto. A winced slightly at the loud noises around him, suppressing a smile. Seeing that his son was done, he walked forward. B threw a pouch of money at the chef, who told them they could return it whenever they wanted. The said chef wrote Naruto's name on top of a board. B and Naruto turned around only to be met with the cold eyes of A, who looked down on them as if they were kids. Well, one of them was. Father, what are you doing here? Naruto asked nervously, rubbing the back of his head. B, on the other hand, tried to sneak away when A put his hand on his shoulder, stopping him. Where do you think you're going? Later. B and Naruto moaned in pain as it brought them back to the mansion, lifting them by their ears. Soon they reached the mansion, letting go of both of them. Naruto landed on his butt. His right ear had turned red, and he was rubbing it, but he still didn't cry, like many 3-year-olds would do in his situation. What was that about? We were both having fun. B asked, standing up, looking at him, and waving his hands around like an idiot. A briefly glanced at his son, who was no longer rubbing his ear, but instead paying attention to them. I don't need the whole village talking about my son who can eat ramen like a monster. The word might spread too far, and some people might hear about it, said with a blank tone. Naruto raised an eyebrow when he noticed his uncle's face twitch a little. What do you mean, father? Naruto questioned, tilting his head to the side. The silence and the sudden cold air around them was uncomfortable, not counting the sudden panic feeling his uncle had for a split second. Why would my uncle feel panic? Naruto wondered, scratching his temples. Nothing, my son, don't worry about it. Now, how about we train? Suggested, his blank face quickly turning into a smiling one. Naruto's face brightened up like a candle. Yes, this time I will do more push-ups than you, the blonde announced, jumping up in the air, rushing inside, quickly followed by the other two, who were talking in hushed tones as they walked inside. Felt proud. His son was doing 20 push-ups, and despite his age, he showed talent already, something felt incredibly proud of. B was busy encouraging Naruto with his stupid rapping. And 25. Naruto exclaimed, his body going limp as he crushed down against the floor, his face sweating like crazy. Well done, little nephew, continue like this, and you will be ready to unlock your chakra in no time, his uncle said, lifting him. Naruto beamed at the words. He knew he was already ready to unlock his chakra. Still, for some reason, his father and grandfather kept telling him to train his body first before unlocking chakra, saying it would be easier and faster to do so and would take less time to adapt to the newly added strength in his body since every person would get stronger if their chakra were unlocked. Yes, and we will become the most awesome ninja duo in the world. Naruto announced, raising his fist in the air, and so did B, who smiled brightly. You got that right, little brother. We will be twice as awesome as your old man. B said in his rapping way. Naruto laughed out loud, while groaned loudly. His brother was definitely a bad influence on his son. After 10 more minutes of craziness, Naruto rested his head against a pillow, but he already felt well rested, something that made him somehow confused. He had noticed several times that his body would be full of energy within minutes, which wasn't really unusual apparently. He had seen kids train twice of his age. Apparently, it took hours to rest instead of minutes fully. Naruto scratched the top of his head, feeling as if he was somehow missing something. He thought of perhaps asking his father, but he knew finding out on his own was much more enjoyable. Dismissing the thought, for now, he closed his eyes, wanting to sleep. Where am I? A voice spoke in darkness, his voice hoarse from the lack of use. He felt something covering half of his face, including his eyes. He tried to lift his hand when his body shuddered. Pain spread through his body like a violent river. Only the years of fighting and pain had prepared him to control himself, and not scream out in pain. He felt himself getting dizzy when he heard a soft voice. Please stand down. Your body is still healing. It was a woman, no doubt, her hand touching his chest, covering it with some kind of oil. He almost winced in pain, almost biting his tongue at the sharp pain across his chest. It was unbearable, his heart beating on his chest. He was surprised that the whole damn room couldn't hear it. Where am I? He asked. His throat felt dry, drier than it had felt when he had been in Suna. In T Village, I found your body in the river. I was prepared to bury you when you gasped. For a moment, I thought the dead were coming back to life, considering your open chest, the woman spoke softly. He thought her voice was sweet, reminding him a bit of Mito when she was in a good mood, which rarely happened. For a moment, he wondered what she meant by his chest being open. What's your name? He asked after a short pause. His tongue felt like a brick, wanting to know the name of his savior, even if he didn't survive this. My name is Yunara. What's your name? She questioned. He managed a weak smile, his consciousness slipping away, hearing the lady calling him. Naruto opened his eyes, feeling a headache. He yanked the sheet away. The sun rising outside was the only light source inside his bedroom. The window was closed, the light going inside through the window, illuminating the room like a warm blanket. What was that all about? Naruto thought. Not the first time he had dreamed these types of dreams, but not this long. Usually, they were a couple of seconds long. He dreamed he was fighting a duo with Kumo clothes. He once dreamed of a strange man with long hair and red armor. Naruto hadn't told anyone yet, but he doubted they were important. Dreams, in general, love to be weird and cryptic. Sometimes, he simply dreamed he was a bird flying high in the air, seeing the 5 great shinobi villages. It was the best type of dream. Seeing that his sleep had disappeared, he decided to try and secretly unlock his chakra. He had found a book in the house that explained chakra and whatnot a few weeks ago. This would be an excellent opportunity to try and surprise his family. After reading the book, Naruto thought that it was too easy, and right now, he was the only one awake in the house. No one would see him going out. He just needed to simply go outside, unlock his chakra, and then go back inside. No one will notice it, Naruto thought with a devilish smirk on his face. Naruto soon walked outside. His house had an enormous courtyard, enough space to build 2 other houses and still have a place for their own courtyard. From outside, he could see the twin mountains of Kumo, the 2 highest mountains of the entire continent. Due to their height, their peak could penetrate the lower clouds passing by. His grandfather told him that he had once climbed to the top without using chakra when he had been 10 years old. The blonde wondered if the old man was exaggerating a little, but considering his strength, perhaps he wasn't. Soon he reached a perfect place to unlock his chakra. There was a waterfall running over the far wall into a pond in front of him. In the center of that pond was a little island of land. There was actually green grass on the ground and another, smaller body of water at the island's center. Bushes bordered the back of the land, and some sort of wooden archway stood at the back also. Naruto sat on the little island, where he thought it was alright in a mediating position, sitting in the grass with his legs crossed and his arms and hands resting in his lap. Naruto could feel the grass softly touching his legs whenever the wind came around. He closed his eyes and started focusing on finding the feeling that the book was talking about. After a few minutes, Naruto felt a very warm feeling on his chest, like embers, a fire kindling. From his chest to his feet, a gentle breeze flew past him. Soon the water's flow around him increased, creating small waves. The wind passed by, and the wind vane on top of the house started spinning wildly, almost flying away. Naruto couldn't feel any of it. Reaching deep inside, he wanted to unlock his chakra, not noticing the closer he got, the more violent the weather got. The moment he grabbed the warm feeling, his chakra exploded, purple electricity started coming out from Naruto like thunderbolts, and the water on the lake was floating 2 meters in the air, creating a ball of water as big as a small house. His chakra was spreading beyond his home. Opening his eyes, the wind and everything turned back to normal. He looked around, confused, black spots on the grass from the lightning bolts. The grass had burned to a crisp, and the ball of water fell back down. He stood up, but as soon as he tried to take a step forward, his legs gave up and falling to his knees, Naruto felt exhausted. His breathing rapid, he desperately tried to catch his breath, but it seemed to get harder by the second. Suddenly he heard the sound of clapping, sweat rolling down his cheeks. He used all his strength left to look up to see his grandfather clapping with a broad smile on his face. Gigi, he asked slowly, wondering what had gotten him so happy and hoping he wasn't in any trouble. You don't know what you just did, do you? His grandfather questioned, stepping closer. Naruto looked confused. He had simply unlocked his chakra, and it wasn't really a big deal. I unlocked my chakra, he said as if it was the most obvious answer. I laughed loudly at his expression before grabbing him in his arms and carrying him inside. Right now, sleep, you're exhausted, and we will talk once you wake up, I said. Naruto looked ready to say something, but he did feel exhausted. He had read that unlocking chakra was exhausting, but he felt as if he had just run a marathon. Resting on the arms of his Gigi, he closed his eyes to sleep. It was a faint sound, but it seemed to grow louder in his ears as he focused on it. It was rhythmic. Drip, drip, drip. He closed his eyes to focus harder, the sound grew louder still. It started to sound like it was right next to him when he opened his eyes and found himself somewhere unfamiliar. It was an enormous and very dark hall. The floor was only slightly flooded, but the water came up above his knees since he was so small. He pressed his lips together, feeling afraid. Only slightly, though. He began to walk, his curiosity growing as he did so. He recognized that he was not alone here. He walked till he came to an enormous gate that was locked tight. The type of which he thought was supposed to keep him out until he heard a raspy breath from within the darkness. Then it seemed more likely it was to keep something from getting out. The blonde peered into the darkness behind bars looking for the source of the breathing. Two enormous red eyes slowly appeared from the darkness, looking down at him. The eyes were red and slit like that of a cat. What are you? Naruto questioned, his voice almost a whisper. The creature grinned, showing his sharp teeth, each larger than Naruto. He closed his eyes to focus harder, the sound grew louder still. It started to sound like it was right next to him when he opened his eyes and found himself somewhere unfamiliar. It was an enormous and very dark hall. The floor was only slightly flooded, but the water came up above his knees since he was so small. He pressed his lips together, feeling afraid. Only slightly, though. He began to walk, his curiosity growing as he did so. He recognized that he was not alone here. He walked till he came to an enormous gate that was locked tight. The type of which he thought was supposed to keep him out until he heard a raspy breath from within the darkness. Then it seemed more likely it was to keep something from getting out. The blonde peered into the darkness behind bars looking for the source of the breathing. Two enormous red eyes slowly appeared from the darkness, looking down at him. The eyes were red and slit like that of a cat. What are you? Naruto questioned, his voice almost a whisper. The creature grinned, showing his sharp teeth, each larger than Naruto. It seems my warden has honored me with his presence. I'm Kyuubi no Yoko. Naruto looked at the giant fox behind bars. The Kyuubi had orange, silky-looking fur, with black markings around his eyes connected to his, funnily enough, rabbit-like ears. The upper body was humanoid, including the hands. The lower body was just like a fox, barring the 9 long swaying tails in the back. The fire was the closest thing they looked like. The red, slitted eyes looked at him closely with a hint of malice and curiosity. You're the Kyuubi, Naruto shouted, amazed, and couldn't help but be perplexed by his sheer size. He knew who Kyuubi was. A year ago, after Gigi taught him how to read, he gave him a book about all the bijus of the ninja world. The book had detailed explanations of each biju, and the strongest was clearly the Kyuubi. Still, his Gigi also explained not to tell anyone about this book. These books were forbidden to read for those of rank Chunin or Genin, and he wasn't even a Genin yet. Naruto, of course, had asked why he needed to read the book, and his Gigi told him that he would understand it one day. Now, looking at the Kyuubi, he believed he understood why. Why are you sealed inside me? Naruto questioned, looking at Kyuubi with no hint of fear in his eyes. Sure, the creature was huge, but he doubted Kyuubi was as scary as Gigi when he got angry. You're what they call a Jinchuriki, a human who has a biju sealed inside them, Kyuubi explained with a huff, looking down at the little brat who was simply a toddler. A jackass, Naruto said, feeling offended to be called that. A Jinchuriki brat. Listen closely, a Jinchuriki. Kyuubi screamed with such strength, sending a wave that made Naruto stumble back, falling on his butt. He closed his ears with his hands at the loud noise. Moving his hands away, he stood up, glaring at the stupid fox. Hey! Don't yell at me, you stupid fox. I will beat the crap out of you, Naruto yelled, pointing a finger at Kyuubi, who grinned, amused. Beat me, a brat like you who needs help to go to the bathroom. Yay! Never in a million years will you beat me. A gust of wind is enough to knock you down, Kyuubi said with a grin. That was really annoying Naruto, who, to show either bravery or foolishness, he walked right in front of the giant gate. Planting his foot firmly on the floor, he glared up at Kyuubi with the scariest look he could show on his face, which was a bit ridiculous when you consider that Naruto was a 4-year-old trying to look intimidating to a giant fox. An intense staring contest ensued, and both competitors weren't backing down. Naruto furrowed his brows, trying to look even more threatening. Kyuubi leaned a bit closer, his eyes almost as large as Naruto, but the blonde didn't back down from a challenge. He would show he was strong and fearless as his Gigi. The air itself around them started getting colder. Kyuubi narrowed his eyes in curiosity as purple bolts of lightning were dancing around the brat's fingertips, and the atmosphere getting colder wasn't something Kyuubi was causing. All his attention was on the staring contest. Naruto didn't notice the water getting colder, and the surface started freezing around the blonde. Bahahahahahahaha! Kyuubi suddenly burst out laughing, breaking eye contact. Naruto looked confused and annoyed that the giant fox was laughing at him. Why are you laughing at? Naruto shouted, spreading his arms, unconsciously sending a bolt of purple lightning right at Kyuubi. Still, the latter moved his paw away before it could hit, instead hitting the floor, the lightning melting the floor, creating a small hole that was smoking. That brat is interesting, but where is that cold feeling coming from? Kyuubi thought with a hint of curiosity, and he hated himself for being interested. Brat, what were you even trying to do? You're nothing but a 4-year-old. You're nothing compared to me, Kyuubi taunted him, hoping to rile up Naruto in hopes of making him angry and using his lightning again. I'm not a brat, I'm almost a grown-up. 2 more years, and I will join the academy, and I will be the best, Naruto shouted, looking up at Kyuubi. He hadn't noticed his purple lightning yet, too busy getting angry with the stupid fox. So what? You will still be a brat, 2 more years won't make a difference. Hell, you will still be a brat to me even 100 years later. Kyuubi replied with a mocking chuckle at the end that had the desired result. Oh, really? How old are you then? Naruto questioned with a dangerous tick on his forehead, folding his arms across his chest. 3,000 years old, brat, Kyuubi replied right away with a grin, and he definitely enjoyed the look of disbelief splattered across his stupid face. Naruto's jaw hangs open upon hearing that. Geez, that means you're an old hag. What did you say, brat? Kyuubi shouted in anger, his claw almost reaching him through the small openings of his cell. This time Naruto stood his ground, not wanting to show fear. Why are you getting angry? You're old, hell, even older than Gigi. Naruto said with a challenging look on his face. I'm a mass of chakra, little brat. The concept of old and young doesn't apply to me, Kyuubi said, growling at the brat. He couldn't believe he had fallen for a cheap trick like that. Oh really? I'm sure every old hag says the same about themselves to feel better, Naruto said with a nasty smirk, especially when Kyuubi slammed his forehead at the gate, his eyes glaring down at Naruto. Still, the blonde could tell there was no malicious intent behind his eyes. Cheeky brat, what do you want? Kyuubi questioned, wanting this to get over so he could sleep. He couldn't believe he had lost his cool because of a brat who called him old. The last time he got angry was when he faced the second strongest shinobi of his time, and now with a toddler. Naruto tilted his head to the side, and now he was confused. What do you mean? I don't know how I got here. If this is a dream, then it is a smelly one, Naruto said, closing his nose as if blocking the smell from Kyuubi, who growled at him. Well, brat, you unlocked your chakra. That must be the reason you are here right now. This is your mindscape, after all, Kyung explained with an amused smile. He hated that he liked the discussion with the toddler. Naruto had a deadpan look on his face. So my mindscape is a sewer and a smelly one. Can I change this? Naruto questioned, looking around at the nasty place before looking up at Kyuubi, who was now resting his head against his paws, his red eyes looking back at Naruto with curiosity. Naruto could feel his emotions, and he was a little glad that the giant old hag was interested in him. Sure. Just imagine the place you want it to be, Kyuubi replied lazily, only his right eye open, watching the brat as he closed his eyes, trying to picture the place in his mind. For a good minute, nothing happened. For a moment, Kyuubi thought that brat was doing it wrong when grass and trees started growing around the place. Kyuubi had to admit that he was a little impressed, even if the brat had a big mouth. Impressive brat, now, can you leave me? I want to sleep, Kyuubi requested, closing his right eye. He knew he could force Naruto out of this place, but since the brat proved helpful, he decided to let him leave on his own. First, how are you sealed inside me? Why, and how do I even get out of here? Naruto questioned, raising 3 fingers from his right hand as he did. You read your books. I'm sealed inside because you humans desire to use my power. It is as simple as that, Kyuubi spoke angrily, his tone changing to a more serious one, letting out a bit of ki that made Naruto fall on his knees. His breathing was rapid, his hand grasping his chest. He tried to fill his chest with oxygen, but the more he breathed in, the more he needed. His chest tightened, he felt like something was slowly crushing his heart, his knees feeling weaker with each passing second. His heart felt it would come out of his chest, his ears hearing nothing but his heart pounding on his chest like it wanted to come out. Suddenly it disappeared. Naruto fell flat on the ground, lying on his stomach, and relief spread over his entire body. Inhaling as much oxygen as he possibly could, he felt like he couldn't get enough of it. After 5 minutes of trying to calm himself, he forced himself to stand up, his eyes glaring at Kyuubi, who looked a little surprised. What was that for? Naruto shouted in anger. A burst of purple lightning spread from his body, and every inch of grass froze immediately. Kyuubi's eyes widened in shock as the bolts of purple lightning were directed at him. Wanting to know how strong they were, Kyuubi made no move to either dodge or block them. The moment it struck him, he felt the entire electricity spread around his body, but it barely hurt. For a moment, Kyuubi was disappointed when the electricity spread throughout his whole body and suddenly started spreading pain. Every bit of his body was getting electrocuted. So that's how it works. It doesn't just damages the area it hit, but spreads like a virus and strikes my organs, Kyuubi thought, impressed. He had been attacked by lightning before, especially when he fought the 2 fools from Kumo. He remembered their lightning jutsus didn't spread like this, they simply barely damaged the area of his body they hit. Looking back at the brat, Kyuubi could see the frozen land around him. He wondered what that was about, but he figured he would find out eventually. Excellent, brat, it seems your thunder is quite dangerous, even for me, Kyuubi praised with a grin. Actually, damaging him was quite a hard thing to achieve. If the purple lightning could do that, then the brat could become powerful one day. Naruto looked at his hands, confused and mesmerized. His frown soon turned into a bright smile. Yada! He celebrated, jumping in the air. I knew I was awesome, he shouted, jumping up in the air in joy. He turned to Kyuubi, whose eyes were closed as if trying to fall asleep. Naruto wanted to ask if he knew anything about this purple lightning, but he could ask his Gigi and father about it. Right now, he wanted to ask him something else. Why are you still here, brat? To leave, you just need concrete in the real world, and you will kinda wake up, Kyuubi explained with clear annoyance, closing his eyes. After waiting a minute, he could tell the brat was still there. Do you want to be friends? Naruto asked abruptly with an innocent smile that made him look cute but not to Kyuubi, who released a growl. Opening his eyes, he stood on his legs, glaring down at the brat. Kyuubi looked at the little brat after he answered why he was still here. He growled, baring his teeth, and started releasing ki at the brat. The effect was immediate. The brat fell on his knees, finding it very hard to breathe. He was sweating heavily. Why do you think I would want to be your friend, brat? Kyuubi questioned furiously, showing his teeth before releasing a roar that sent the brat flying before slamming against the wall. Cracks like spider webs spread across the surface of the wall. The little boy was panting. It took a whole minute for the brat to catch his breath and slowly stood on his legs, finding it hard to even stand on his legs. Naruto eyed the Kyuubi. He took a huge breath. Because you're here all alone, I still don't know much about Jinchuriki, but I know you're sealed inside me for as long as I live, Naruto explained with a sad smile. Kyuubi narrowed his eyes. The giant fox didn't understand what the brat was trying to achieve with this. I know it can get really boring. That's why I'm offering you my friendship. You're not going anywhere, so why not make this enjoyable for both of us? Naruto questioned, with a broad smile, spreading his arms wide at the end. You don't understand, brat. You're still a kid and nothing else. You and your kind caused me pain, and to my siblings, Kyuubi wanted to say but held that one for himself. You hunt me, you caused me pain, your kind imprisoned me, you used me as a weapon for your own benefit. Why would I want to be your friend, someone who will sooner or later use my power and don't lie to me? I know one day you will want to use my power, Kyuubi spoke, his voice full of malicious intent. Naruto looked down, understanding his point of view. He understood that Kyuubi had no reason to trust him or anything else. Suddenly he came up with an idea, looking up at Kyuubi with the brightest smile he could muster. Then I swore to you that I will never use your power unless you give me permission, Kyuubi-sama. Naruto swore with a bow of his head. Kyuubi growled loudly at the stubborn brat, his eyes looking at the figure standing just behind Naruto. He wondered how could a toddler like him be so convincing. It wasn't normal. Why is the brat reminding me of him, of all people, Kyuubi thought, getting annoyed by his own memories. A flash of a man with a beard and a kind face passed through his eyes. It hurts, doesn't it? The brat whispered, but Kyuubi heard him. He narrowed his eyes, showing his teeth again, and released a furious sigh. What are you saying, brat? He asked with a firm tone and showing power in his voice. The water on the floor was shaking because of his voice and power. He was still leaking a small amount of ki, which made the brat sweat heavily. I know none of us wanted this. I didn't want you to be sealed inside me, and I'm sure you would want the same. But I know that you're not just a creature of hatred. You have feelings like everyone else, so yes, I want to be your friend. We are stuck together, so it is better if we become friends instead of hating each other, Naruto finished with a grin. That reminded Kyuubi of both Kushina and Mito Uzumaki. He was sealed in both of them, but they didn't want his power. They never tried to control him. That was something Kyuubi respected in the Uzumaki clan. They were peaceful people. Kyuubi couldn't remember the last time he felt anger and little happiness simultaneously. He felt angry because he hated humans and happy because the kid in front of him looked at him as a living creature. He could feel Naruto meant what he was saying and not just saying empty words like almost everyone else. Kyuubi could feel his emotions and knew the brat meant every word. Kyuubi stood up on his fours and strolled to the end of his cell. His whole figure was visible, and Naruto looked surprised to see how large he was. Now he understood why people said a single tail of the Kyuubi was strong enough to destroy a mountain. Father, you said we should help the humans. I will give this brat a chance, Kyuubi thought with a sad smile on his face remembering him, much to Naruto's surprise. Naruto was still looking up at Kyuubi. He could feel and see different emotions flashing through his red eyes. It reminded him of Gigi when Naruto had asked him why he didn't have a grandmother. That happened a year ago. His Gigi hadn't answered, and for the first time, he had seen tears in his eyes, a man who could fight entire armies and not blink, yet, the memory of his dear wife was the only thing that made him tear up. You swear you won't use my power without my permission? Kyuubi questioned, wanting him to understand he was walking a fine line right now. Yes, I won't use it without your permission, Naruto quickly confirmed with a bow of his head, his blue eyes looking back at his red ones. Kyuubi could tell the brat truly meant it, but only time would show just how much he actually means it. Very well, brat, from now on, we are friends, Kyuubi accepted. The brat started jumping around like a toddler with a big smile. Soon he stopped jumping and turned to face Kyuubi. What about your name? I mean, Kyuubi simply means 9 tails. What is your name? He questioned, expecting an answer, but instead, Kyuubi shook his head. Not yet. I want first to see if you keep your word. If I see that you do, I will tell you my name. Now leave me alone to sleep, Kyuubi spoke before forcing Naruto out of the mindscape. After he disappeared, Kyuubi lay down, his head resting on his paws, thinking about the one person he thought about whenever he was alone. Damn you, father. Naruto. 1 month later. The blonde was currently walking around the village. His father had told him yesterday to prepare. Naruto asked him to prepare for what exactly, but he got no answers. His father simply gave him a smirk that he had grown to be wary of. Why ruin the surprise? Is much better to find out for yourself. While Naruto knew his father made a good point, that didn't really help with his feeling of excitement and anxiety. Despite being a month since he met Kyuubi, he had yet to tell his family about him. He wondered if they knew about it, but he figured his Gigi, who was also the Raikage, definitely knew about it. Naruto had thought of perhaps telling his Gigi about his purple lightning, but he wanted to surprise him the next time they fought each other. Now, he was running, trying to find a shop with gloves, swords, and other items needed for fighting. Turning around a corner, he slammed against someone, both fell down with a huff. Naruto opened his eyes, and standing up, he looked down at whoever he had hit. I'm sorry, I wasn't looking, Naruto quickly apologized, extending his hand to help the girl. The blonde expected the girl to grab his hand. Instead, she looked at his hand before looking up at his blue eyes. This wasn't intentional, she questioned, doubtful. This made Naruto raise an eyebrow. He had expected many things, perhaps an insult or simply slapping his hand away, but not that question. No, of course not. Why would I want to do that? Naruto asked, genuinely confused. Looking at her, he couldn't notice anything odd about her. The opposite, she looked like someone he wouldn't mind calling a friend. I see, she reluctantly said, accepting his hand. He helped her up. Now having a better look at her, one of the first things he noticed was her blonde hair. Her hair was bound with taut bandages, and she had dark eyes. She wore a short-sleeved black and purple blouse and black pants, both of which had a design similar to clouds on them, purple fingerless gloves, and a chain of blue beads wound around her left hand. My name is Naruto Yatsuki. Name's Yugito. Name's Yugito, the girl replied quickly as if trying to run away from him. Naruto noticed and felt the cold glares sent towards them, but not towards him, only at the girl who looked slightly uncomfortable by the stairs, her body shifting slightly. Yugito, that's a good name. How about I treat you for some ramen for crashing against you? Naruto suggested with his broad smile. The girl was visibly taken aback by the blonde's words. She had expected him to glare or something, but not invite her to eat ramen together. Are you sure? I don't want to be. That's bull crap. Come with me, Naruto said, interrupting her. Grabbing her hand, she smiled slightly before following behind. Both of them couldn't help but notice how soft each other's hands were. So, where were you going? Naruto started the conversation, looking at her over his shoulder. I was just returning from the training, needed to go home, Yugito reluctantly explained, moving away a strand of her hair from her face. Training. You will join the academy after 2 years? Naruto quickly asked excitedly. While he enjoyed spending time with his family, he wanted to have friends around his age. For a moment, there was no answer. Naruto wondered if he had said something wrong when she spoke. Yes, I will show everyone. I will become the best kunoichi in the world. Yugito exclaimed with literal blue fire in her eyes and a raised fist in the air. She didn't know where that power came from. She usually didn't speak like this. Naruto's eyes sparked like stars. That's amazing. I will become the best cage that ever existed, Naruto announced immediately. Many people stopped walking, looking at them confused. Yugito smiled, thinking his dream was an amazing one. She noticed he said, cage, instead of rakeage. She felt happy to meet someone similar to her, but she figured he would soon find out about her secret. Once that happened, it would be all over. So, where are we going? We're having ramen at my favorite restaurant. It's not too far from here. Believe me when I tell you they serve the best food in all of Kumo. Sounds great, she said as they began to walk. On the way to the restaurant, Yugito and Naruto talked about life in general. Naruto would listen to her and answer with jokes and compliments, as well as more serious answers when the topic they were talking about demanded it. Yugito found herself enjoying the conversation she was having with Naruto. When they finally arrived at the restaurant, Yugito found out it was none other than Rom-Tom's. As they entered, Yugito was surprised by how warm and cozy the place was. It wasn't too big nor too small, just the perfect size. The decorations were nothing fancy, but they certainly were interesting. They were quickly greeted by a waitress who recognized Naruto almost instantly. Naruto, it's so good to see you. How long have you been gone? The waitress asked cheerfully. Hey, Yanra. Yeah, I know I've been missing for some time. How are things going? Naruto asked with a grin. Can't really complain, she answered with a shrug before turning to face Yugito with a big smile. Oh, who is the girl? She asked with a teasing tone. A friend of mine, Naruto answered, embarrassed, rubbing the back of his head. Yugito expected the waitress to glare at her, but instead, she smiled. Well, any friend of Naruto is welcome here, she said softly. Thanks, Yugito said warmly. She was thankful for not being referred to as the demon cat, or something like that. The last thing she wanted right now was to have people surrounding them and interrupting her time with her new friend. They were both guided to an empty table in the corner of the room, where they sat down. Yanra handed them the menus and said she would return shortly to take their orders. Naruto looked at Yugito and smiled. So Yugito, what do you think of the place so far? I gotta say, it's really lovely. I can see why you like it. Yugito responded, still looking around, trying to remember everything about it, every little detail. The blonde chuckled. I'm glad you like it. I come here often with my family. I'm sure they would like you a lot. Naruto said with a broad smile. Yugito doubted that but didn't voice it out. Thank you, Naruto. I appreciate it. Sometimes it is very tiring to train all the time, and I really need time to relax. Yugito said with a smile. Yanra came back and took their orders. Yugito ordered sushi while Naruto asked for ramen he was so fond of. The waitress took off and came back 15 minutes later with the food. When Yugito tasted her food, her eyes turned to stars at the delicious taste. When Naruto told her this place served the best food in Kumo, she thought he was exaggerating a bit. But now she realized that it was an understatement. This had to be the best food she had ever tasted in all of her life, hands down. 20 minutes and 10 packs of sushi later. Ah, that was the best meal ever. Yugito shouted as she rubbed her belly. I told you this place was the best, Naruto said with a smirk. Do you think you have room for dessert? MHH, that is tempting, Yugito responded humorously. Then something caught her eye. Hey Naruto, what's that guy's deal? She asked, pointing to a certain individual. Naruto turned his head back and saw a guy with two girls, one in each of his arms, followed by two other guys. The guy Yugito pointed at had the weirdest haircut Naruto had ever seen in his life, as all of his purple hair was inclined toward the right part of his face. He had pale skin and a disturbing smile that went along with glaring eyes. All in all, he basically was the living definition of creepy. I don't know what his deal is, just ignore him, Naruto said with a little shrug. Why is he looking at us? Yugito asked with a dirty face, still looking at the man. Beats me. The man then made his way to Naruto and Yugito, followed by his two nameless teammates. Instead of talking right away, he stood there just smirking in a way that could unnerve anyone just by looking at him. After a minute of awkward silence, Naruto decided to figure out what that guy wanted. Is there a reason you are staring at us like that, or are you just plain weird? The purple-haired weirdo chuckled a bit before starting to talk. Well, if it isn't the demon cat chick and her boyfriend, the man said. Naruto noticed how he addressed Yugito, and the latter's happy face suddenly paled. What I would like to know is how you expect me to take you seriously with that haircut. Naruto retorted, earning a chuckle out of Yugito. The man stared at Naruto for a moment with his eyes slightly twitching but regained his cool. He then approached Yugito and leaned very close. What is a brat like you doing here, spoiling everyone's fun? He questioned. Yugito closed her nose, looking disgusted. You smell. How about you wash your teeth before talking to anyone, Yugito said with a glare of her own. The man clenched his teeth together, looking ready to strike when Naruto decided it was enough. Touch her, and I will beat her, Naruto threatened. The man threatening Yugito was a civilian, not a shinobi. Naruto knew he could beat him easily. TCH, like it would make a difference. Fine, try to touch me, you loser. Tano said, lifting his arms in a, come at me, sort of way. The man was a little disappointed that his previous strategy didn't work, but it was unimportant. The brat in front of him was nothing more than a toddler. He, on the other hand, was a grown man much stronger than him. He would show everyone how strong he was by beating a toddler. Deal, Naruto said with a smirk. Before the man could react, Naruto's fist greeted the man's left eye. The man fell and landed butt first into the ground, both of his hands covering his left eye while growling in pain. His friends tried to help him stand up, but the man shoved them back as he stood on his feet. When he retrieved his hand from his face, he revealed a very darkish eye. Listen to me, clown, you and your weak friends can either scram or get beaten. Final warning, Naruto said with a face that meant business. The man glared angrily at Naruto, who didn't feel threatened at all. He scoffed and left the restaurant, trying his best not to feel humiliated, which he miserably failed at. Naruto sighed before turning to face Yugito. Sorry about that. Yugito was anything but angry. Are you kidding me? That was hilarious. Did you see how embarrassed he was? She pipped up. And so the rest of the dinner went on without further interruptions. Naruto and Yugito chatted for a long time, laughing and enjoying themselves. Yugito had nearly forgotten what it felt like to have a good time like this, not thinking about her training nor the fact that she was a Jinchiki. Whatever I'm called, she thought, annoyed, mentally rolling her eyes. Why couldn't people come up with easier names to remember? Time seemed to slow down for her when she stared at those blue orbs of her new friend. She had noticed that Naruto didn't react to the man calling her a demon cat. She just hoped he wouldn't abandon her if he found out later the truth, either from his family or his other friends. Little did she know, Naruto had the same feeling when he looked at Yugito's dark pearls she had in her pretty face. One thing Naruto absolutely enjoyed doing was making Yugito laugh. He didn't care if it was a full-blown roar kind of laugh or a faint giggle she tried to hold. Her laughter, along with her cute smile, was enough for Naruto to feel almost hypnotized. Eventually, they decided to finish dinner and take a walk. When Naruto paid for the food and said his goodbyes to Yanra and her father, who apparently wasn't angry for the fight Naruto had earlier, the new friends left Rom-Toms and made their way to Kumo's Central Park. As they arrived, Naruto saw a small ice cream post and bought a strawberry ice cream for Yugito and a raspberry one for himself. The friends visited some of the city's most famous attractions and sightseeings before calling it a night. It was getting late, and both of them felt it was time to go back to their own homes. So, did you enjoy our time together? Naruto asked her, walking around the park. It was amazing. You really know how to show somebody a good time. Yugito said with a bright smile. I aim to please, especially being my first friend and all. To say Yugito was shocked was an understatement. What? I'm your first friend? Naruto scratched the back of his head in slight embarrassment. Yeah, well, I mostly spend time with my uncle, who loves annoying my father with his weird way of expressing himself with his awful singing voice, Naruto said, with a burst of laughter, remembering the many times his father had gotten angry with B. Yugito didn't know why, but for the first time in her life, she felt special. To think that she was Naruto's first friend was something she liked. Thanks, Naruto-kun. You're welcome. Maybe you would be interested in hanging out again? Naruto asked as if challenging her. And Yugito was not one to back down from a challenge. You better believe I'm interested, she said with a smirk. I guess I'll see you tomorrow morning. 1 week later, Naruto and Yugito are sitting comfortably on a park bench together, enjoying the lovely warm sunny day with a couple of sticks of dangos. They stopped by the dango shop first to get some sweet treats, but Naruto noticed something very odd when they made their way between there and the park. Curiosity overcomes him, and he then decides to ask his fellow blonde a question. Yugito. Yes, Naruto-kun. Why are the villagers always glaring at you, like you insulted them or something? Yugito knew this moment was coming, as she, too, noticed the hateful glares she was receiving from the villagers earlier. But now she fears her burden will drive her new friend away. So she decided to be the ignorant one for a change. Quote. Who knows? They always look at me like that, Yugito says nonchalantly. But unfortunately, Naruto could tell that she was not being honest. Don't lie to me, Yugito-chan. My father always told me how to tell when someone lies, and I can feel that you're being dishonest with me. Do you not trust me? Naruto questioned, feeling hurt, standing up, and looking down at Yugito, who avoided his eyes. She looked at the blink of crying, and for a brief moment, she wondered what he meant by feeling that she was lying, but she ignored it for now. After a minute of total silence, Yugito felt her lower lips trembling. Is better for you not to know it, please, she begged, looking at her hands on her lap, her lower jaw trembling. She felt her eyes welling up with tears when she felt his hand touching her shoulder. Why? You can tell me everything. There's nothing you can say that would make me not want to be your friend, Naruto said, encouraging her with the softest voice he could muster. He could feel her emotions and figured she feared him not wanting to hang out with her anymore. He didn't know why she would have that fear, but he would never simply abandon her for no reason. Yugito wondered how he could tell her emotions. This wasn't something one was supposed to be able to do, opening her mouth to speak when she heard heavy footsteps approaching them. Yugito turned around and saw a group of kids, who were slightly older than her, slowly gathering around them. Look at the demon cat. Why are you even still breathing? Who is he? Your next meal. The bullies taunted her, sending her dark and disgusted looks until Naruto put himself between them and Yugito. Leave her alone, you jerks. Naruto yelled out loudly to the group in front of him. What the? Get out of the way, Blondie. This is between us and the freak with the demon cat. The group's supposed leader called out to the would-be hero. Not a chance. What do you have against her anyway? Are you just upset that she's a much better person than all of you, and you bully her in hopes of making yourself feel better for your pathetic lives? Because only a complete idiot and a coward would need a gang of pricks just to bully one girl. Naruto yelled out without a hint of fear in his voice. Why you? I'll show you who's stupid, you shit. The elder boy tried to push Naruto. Yugito prepared to fight them. Not the first time she had beaten them to a pulp. She wouldn't allow them to beat up her first and only friend. The leader sent a punch toward Naruto, but it never reached him. Naruto stopped his punch with his hand before grasping his fist with his fingers. The leader of the group let out a scream of pain, falling on his knees as Naruto simply tightened the grip around the fist. You're all grown, man, and you spent your time bullying my friend. Do you not have a life of your own, or are you all that pathetic that the only life you have is whatever or not you can find my friend and bully her? Naruto questioned with cold fury, his blue eyes turning icy. The leader's friends paled, falling on their butts at the killing intent Naruto was showing. His grip tightened, and snap, the leader cried out in pain, holding his broken hand. Naruto then kicked him in the chest, sending him flying in the air before falling down unconscious. The other three wanted to run away, but Naruto's cold eyes made them freeze where they stood. Naruto's chakra started spreading violently around Naruto, and the grass and every bit of liquid froze, turning to ice as Naruto marched towards them. They all wanted to desperately run away, but their bodies weren't moving. You touch my friend again. I will make you regret the day you were born, Naruto promised. The three bullies mustered enough strength to nod, their mouths just weren't moving. Naruto's icy eyes turned back to normal blue ones, turning around to face Yugito, who was looking at him in complete shock. This was the second time someone had defended her from bullies. Without saying a word to each other, they both walked away, leaving the bullies behind, who quickly helped their leader to the hospital. Naruto decided to walk her back to her home, just in case someone decided they wanted to bully her. Reaching her house, Yugito stopped walking and turned to face Naruto, who gave her a sad smile. I'm sorry about what happened. I lost control, the blonde apologized, knowing he could have scared her but was surprised, and his face turned bright red when Yugito instead kissed his cheek with her soft lips before winking at him. Naruto-kun, I'm happy you stood up for me, but you heard what they called me, why are you still my friend? She questioned, looking directly into his eyes, wanting to know right now if Naruto would still be her friend even if he knew the truth. You mean when they called you the D word, then don't worry. I don't give a crap about what you have sealed inside you. To me, you're my friend, and always will be, Naruto said with sincerity, getting a big hug from Yugito, who was crying. You're my friend too, Naruto-kun. Tomorrow. After their conversation last night, Naruto returned back home, and his father demanded to know where he had been. Still, the blonde dodged the question and simply distracted him by saying something about training and B wanting to teach him how to sing, which had the desired reaction of his father punching B and sending him flying through the window. As the sun rose up over the Kumo village, Naruto fought the everyday struggle. The brawl he was cursed to engage in for the rest of his life. His greatest opponent a threat bigger than anything someone had ever faced. Getting out of bed, as Naruto relentlessly tried to stand up, he could feel it. He was winning. When his feet touched the wooden floor, he used all his strength to move. If he failed to get up, he knew he would be doomed, and the dark forces of laziness would stand tall at the very end. It was now or never. Using all of his might, he jumped out of bed and took a minute to regain his balance. It took a while, but it was done. He looked back and glanced at the corpse that was his bed, sheets completely out of place. A reminder of the grand battle he fought every day. Once more, I stand victorious against you. We will face again tomorrow, but be certain that I shall be your downfall like every time we have fought, the fearsome warrior thought dramatically as he exited his room. It was finally over. Walking towards the dining room, Naruto was thinking about what he would do this morning. It had been a while since he continued his workout sessions, so he decided that he should make up for it by extending them temporarily with longer and more exhausting exercises. Occasionally, Naruto would pack a few things and go to a secluded area where he could try out new techniques in peace. Talking about Naruto's training, he never showed his true abilities to his father. He wanted to surprise him when his father sent him to the academy. His father had told him that he would test his abilities a week before entering the academy, and that's when Naruto would show his true strength. Naruto escaped his thoughts. Now it was time for breakfast, and when it was time for breakfast, it was time for breakfast and nothing more. Hearing his uncle's voice, he paid it no mind until he heard a different voice that he had definitely heard before and wondered why she was here. Opening the door, he was surprised to see Yugito and his uncle talking. Hearing the door open, both of them turned to see Naruto. "Good morning, Naruto," B greeted him first, but the blonde didn't answer. Instead, he looked at Yugito, who was just as surprised as he was. "What are you doing here, Naruto-kun?" Yugito-chan. Hearing his uncle's voice, he paid it no mind until he heard a different voice that he had definitely heard before and wondered why she was here. Opening the door, he was surprised to see Yugito and his uncle talking. Hearing the door open, both of them turned to see Naruto. "Good morning, Naruto," B greeted him first, but the blonde didn't answer. Instead, he looked at Yugito, who was just as surprised as he was. "What are you doing here, Naruto-kun?" Yugito-chan. B looked at both of them, confused for a moment, before smiling like an idiot. "Oh, you already know each other," he said, raising both of their arms in the air. "Yay, I know him, her," both said simultaneously, looking at each other. Both were taken aback that they both spoke at the same time. They laughed a bit before Naruto decided to address the elephant in the room. "Yugito-chan, what are you doing here?" the blonde asked his blonde friend. "To control Matabi's chakra, she's a Jinchuriki just like me," B simply informed him carelessly, pointing a thumb at himself and another at Yugito, not really getting why the blonde girl was finding it so hard to tell him simply. Yugito looked up at B with a cold glare, her eyes turning like a cat's for a moment. She wanted to tell himself not for this fool to say it loud like that. "Wow, you're the Matabi Jinchiku. I'm the Kyuubi jackass," Naruto shouted without thinking twice but regretted it right away when he heard a loud groan inside him and knowing that he had yet to tell his family that he knew about the existence of Kyuubi. This made Yugito's eyes spark like stars. Naruto was just like her. Yugito didn't notice it, but she felt tears streaming down her cheeks. Naruto could be what she had been looking for her whole life. A dear friend who wouldn't be afraid of her. She was about to ask him why he hadn't told her that he was a Jinchiki too. When B-sensei spoke with a very serious tone, that was very unusual to hear from his mouth. "Naruto, how do you know about Kyuubi?" B asked carefully, stepping forward towards his nephew. The way he always was rapping was gone, now talking seriously. The blonde felt a shiver in his body just by his voice. "You know that I unlocked my chakra a month ago," Naruto said nervously, rubbing the back of his head. B simply nodded, remembering his brother celebrating the occasion. "After I unlocked my chakra, I fell asleep and met Kyuubi, and he wasn't really that bad. He's actually quite cool once you talk with him," Naruto explained with a broad grin, earning a louder groan inside his stomach. B, on the other hand, could tell Naruto was being honest, and knowing that no one outside of their family knew the truth was a relief. "Cool. Are we talking about the same Kyuubi, because the one I know is not cool?" Hachibi spoke in B's mind, who chuckled hearing that. "Mayhaps my little nephew has found a way to tame him." He spoke while mentally moving his arms around like a fool. Hachibi groaned in annoyance but actually hoped that was the case. "Well, maybe. Last I saw him, Kyuubi wasn't really a big fan of humans. I'm surprised your nephew even had an opportunity to talk to him in the first place. I would have bet that Kyuubi would simply force him out of the mindscape right away." Hachibi said, not saying Kyuubi's real name. He would mention it only if Kyuubi allowed it. "Well, it is a start. Do you think we should go ahead with his training?" B questioned mentally. "I think you should, and your nephew needs to get stronger. This world is not soft to weak people. Hachibi grumbled. B frowned mentally upon hearing that. He knew his best friend had a good point, but he wished his nephew would be a child for a bit longer and not start training when he was only 4 years old. He escaped his thoughts when he heard Naruto ask Yugito something. So, have you ever seen Matabi? Naruto asked curiously, leaning closer to the blonde girl who had a dumbfounded look on her face. Ah, I haven't actually. I have talked with her but not actually met her. Yugito explained, a little embarrassed, before looking at Naruto again. You have seen Kyuubi, haven't you? Yes, he looks like a big furball with too many tails, Naruto said with a laugh, not hearing both Matabi and Hachibi laughing out loud like crazy hearing that description. Boy, who are you calling a furball? Do I need to remind you that I'm the strongest Biju in this world? Kyuubi warned him with a growl. That doesn't change the fact that you're still a furball and an old hag on top of that, Naruto said mentally. Kyuubi let out a roar that shook the entire forest. Cheeky brat, Kyuubi said with a little smile that he was trying really hard to surpass. Naruto suddenly remembered why Yugito was here in the first place. Uncle, you said you would train Yugito-chan, right? Yes, you can come too if you want, B said, knowing his nephew liked to start training as soon as possible. Naruto jumped in the air with a raised fist after hearing that, while Yugito was happy to spend more time with her one and only friend. Later, reaching the training yard, he landed near Yugito while his uncle was busy doing ridiculous poses for some unknown reason. Well, kids, the first step to control your chakra is to stick a leaf on your forehead, his uncle sensei said before he pulled out a book from his pouch and started writing on it with a small pencil. I haven't practiced it yet, he replied with his hands behind his head. Well, I will teach you how to do it, give you a few hints here and there, B said while rapping at the same time. Alright, kid, the first step is to take a leaf and use your chakra to stick it to your forehead like this, his sensei said, demonstrating the exercise. Naruto saw with awe as the leaf stuck to his forehead. Yugito smiled, happy to train and get stronger. Naruto and Yugito nodded before picking up a leaf from the ground and keeping it on their foreheads and imagining their chakra creating suction at the point where the leaf touched their foreheads. After a few minutes, the leaf fell to the ground. Naruto just smiled and picked it up again. B was resting in the grass against a tree, writing in his book and looking at Naruto. Naruto closed his eyes and tried to concentrate and focus his chakra on a single point. Surprisingly, after 8 more tries, the leaf stuck to his forehead like glue. Only 9 tries to get the amount of chakra right. Yugito did the same. Her first 5 tries resulted in the leaf burning in blue flames. The following 2 tries resulted in the leaf falling from her forehead. The 8th try resulted in the leaf sticking to her forehead. The leaf quickly stuck to his forehead on the 10th try, and he stood there smiling proudly. Using chakra for the first time felt really good. He had to imagine how his chakra flowed and sort of command it to do so, and voila! Task accomplished. B noticed the leaf had crumbled into a ball the moment his nephew stopped trying to stick it on his forehead. B wasn't sure what to think of it but decided to ignore it for now. He figured he would find out sooner or later. Naruto, you did well, B complimented him with a smile. But still very impressed with how fast Naruto completed his chakra control exercise. B knew that probably was because of his Uzumaki blood. Those from that clan were known to be masters of Fuinjutsu, and to be one, they must have excellent chakra control, not like medical shinobis, but very close to one. B wondered if his nephew could use the chakra chains like Kushina was able to, maybe ever her infamous sword, but B decided to ignore that for now, one step at a time, and that sword was currently in Konoha. Not the nearest place to Kumo. Naruto noticed the way his uncle was looking at him, and he could feel pride but a hint of sadness coming from his sensei. Sensei, why are you sad? Naruto suddenly asked, catching him off guard. B knew from his father that Naruto always knew how someone felt as if he could read their emotions, but that was something he had heard that only Mito Uzumaki could do. Don't worry, Naruto, you just remind me of someone, B replied, dismissing his concerns with a wave of his hands. B-sensei, when are we going to train in using Matabi's chakra? Yugito asked him, wondering if she and Naruto could train on that. Not so fast. First, you must meet Matabi and become friends before you start using her chakra. B informed the girl, who had a downcast look after hearing that. She wondered how to become friends with a Biju, could they ever become friends? Suddenly she felt a hand touching her shoulder. She looked to her left to see Naruto grinning. He looked at her as if he knew exactly what she was feeling. Don't worry about anything. You can become friends with anyone, that includes Bijus as well. You became friends with a blockhead like B after all, Naruto encouraged her, earning a, hey, from his uncle that both of them ignored. Yugito smiled upon hearing that, her heart filling with confidence. You're right, Naruto. This won't be a problem. Yugito said, turning to look at B, who started doing his dances. A victory dance this time. That's the way, Yugito-chan. Show everyone your fire. Yugito and Naruto felt bad for Hachibi. Having someone like him as a host must be torture. After 10 minutes of pointless rapping, B instructed Yugito on how to enter her mindscape, and after that was done, Yugito was sitting crossed-legged in the grass, both Naruto and B watching her closely. Naruto, what did you talk about with Kyuubi? B questioned him after a short moment of silence between the two of them. He figured they could talk until Yugito finished her business. Well, I asked him if he wanted to be friends, but he said that he doesn't want to become friends with someone who will see him as nothing but extra chakra, Naruto said with a smile, not at all bothered by his words. This earned a curious look from Kyuubi inside. He could feel Naruto's emotions after all. And it felt good that, so far, Naruto genuinely meant his words. I see, B thought, slightly relieved. He had been worried that Kyuubi had blurted out that Naruto's real parents were dead, and he came from Konoha. I wouldn't worry about that, B. Kyuubi might not like humans, but he prefers not to interfere in their business. The only way Kyuubi could tell him is if Naruto himself asks him about that. Hachibi spoke, reassuring him that for now, Naruto wouldn't know the truth accidentally from an outside source. B felt relief. He knew sooner or later, they would tell him the truth. But he preferred to be them who would tell him, not someone else. Don't worry, Naruto, sooner or later, Kyuubi will see what an incredible kid you are, B said, rubbing the top of Naruto's head, who laughed but tried to move his hand away. Suddenly they both felt a burst of Biju chakra coming from Yugito. Both Naruto and B stood up. The Eight Tails Jinchuriki put his hand on Naruto's shoulder and put him behind him. They both saw Yugito's nails growing, looking more like knives, and the grass around started burning out of nowhere, her tails dancing with the wind. Suddenly the chakra burst stopped, taking both of them by surprise. For a minute, there was complete silence as the wind stopped moving so fast. Naruto stepped forward, her eyes were still closed, and her nails slowly turned back to normal. Yugito-chan. The moment he called her name, her eyes opened, but instead of her usual black eyes looking back at him, they were mismatched, one golden and one green, with a slit in the center that reminded Naruto of Kyuubi's eyes. Naruto-kun. It worked. She suddenly shouted, throwing herself at him in a bear-like hug. You were right, Naruto-kun. We became friends. Yugito shouted, holding him tightly, not noticing his face paling the more she had him. Yugito, he can't breathe, B said, pointing at the pale Naruto. Oh, I'm sorry, Naruto. Yugito apologized, pulling away from him, the blonde boy desperately trying to catch his breath. After a minute of breathing heavily, Naruto turned back to normal now that his nephew was no longer in danger. B asked Yugito what had happened between her and Matabi. Yugito simply explained that the big cat wanted to be able to talk with her and to be able to have access to her dopaminergic receptors, Yugito explained, scratching her head at the end, not really sure what the last one meant. B rolled his eyes hearing that, and Naruto could swear he heard Kyuubi murmuring. Typical Matabi. Hey, B-sensei, now that I've got it, what's next? Yugito asked with a grin, excited to get stronger. Your next exercise would be to climb this tree with only your feet, he instructed both of them, pointing at a tree behind him. Naruto and Yugito gave him a quizzical look. Isn't that kind of impossible, sensei? B's eye smiled and lightly bonked him at the back of his head, with the aid of chakra. Honestly, where does your intelligence sometimes go, out of your head? Naruto rubbed the back of his head and laughed sheepishly. B then demonstrated the exercise. This is kind of similar to the leaf sticking exercise, except you are sticking yourself to a tree instead of sticking a leaf to you. If you use too little chakra, your foot won't stick. You use too much chakra, you get blasted off the tree. Begin. You can use a running start if you want. He showed him climbing the tree and throwing an actual kunai in front of them. Naruto and Yugito grabbed their respective kunai. He walked to the tree and put his right foot on the bark, regulating the amount of chakra required to stick. Sadly, it turned out not to be as easy as they originally thought. By the time night came, both Yugito and Naruto had bruises all over their bodies, yet, none of them could walk on trees. Soon it was dark, and they went home. Naruto said goodnight to Yugito before following B to their home. Once arriving there, B told A and I that Naruto knew about Kyuubi, and they both told him that he wasn't under any pressure to use Kyuubi's chakra as soon as possible. Even if he never managed, he could still become a great shinobi on his own. Naruto then, like the idiot he is, along with his father and uncle, challenged I to an arm wrestling match. Your doom, I announced with a cold calm voice that sent shivers into their hearts. I put a barrel in the center of the room. The moment it started, Naruto, A, and B tried their best to beat him, but I's arm just wasn't moving, not even an inch. Their bursts of chakra caused the house to start shaking. A and B clenched their teeth to the point that they would break at any second. Naruto was trying his best along with them. After 1 minute of trying, I grinned. Kids, he murmured before, with one move, beating all three of them. The moment their arms hit the floor, 1/3 of the house broke down. As if a bomb had been suddenly set off inside the house. Naruto coughed loudly. Having debris on top of him wasn't exactly ideal, not counting both his uncle and father. I simply shook his head in amusement. Despite no longer being in his prime, it seems he was still powerful. You three will clean this whole thing, I ordered, standing in front of them. This made all three gasp. Naruto was very eager to begin his journey into becoming a great ninja and eventually the best Kage in history. He was still an hour early before I arrived. And since he had slept all day yesterday, now was a good time for him to start reading the scrolls that the old Raikage had given him. Maybe I should learn more about chakra, says the 4-year-old blonde to himself. But that was only a general term regarding the subject. He wanted to know more. How it works, how to control it, and how to use it. Thankfully the scroll I had given him was well explained and easy to understand for someone his age. He was surprised and awed by the unlimited potential of what chakra could do. Especially for someone who has a tremendous amount of chakra reserves and excellent chakra control. Thanks to his furry, little, friend, he had the first part covered. But the downside is, having too much chakra can be very difficult to control, according to the scroll. He decided, then and there, that chakra control should be his main priority. But he still has his work cut up for him. After an hour of reading, Naruto didn't even notice that his Gigi was arriving at the training ground behind him. But he wasn't alone. Standing next to him was one of the Raikage's most trusted bodyguards and elite ninjas. An Anbu. This Anbu is a fairly tall, dark-skinned man with a slightly bulbous nose, black eyes that usually look bored, and shaggy, white hair which covers his left eye. He wears a high-collared, sleeveless uniform with loose-fitting pants, bandages on his wrists, and the one strap over one shoulder flak jacket of a Kumogakure shinobi. His mask was a white face split by a black lightning strike. When the Anbu and the old Raikage arrived at the